2 or 3. Welcome to ThinkTech Hawaii. Today's show, we will be talking about Hawaii and the opportunities for international education and exchange. I'm your host, Ellise Akazawa. I have 3 guests in studio today, all from Education First: Liz Morquecho, Jenny Hickman, and Kamakani Macdonald-Chun. Thank you all so much for being here in studio today, for coming down. Welcome.
Thanks for having us.
We've got quite a program lined up. It's going to be really interesting, and I think it's going to be a really fun program because we're going to be talking specifically about how Hawaii can develop more of an international presence. So lots of stuff to talk about. So first of all, why don't we start with a little bit about your backgrounds? Liz, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, my name is Liz Morquecho. I'm an administrative coordinator at Education First. I went to Hawaii Pacific University, but I'm originally from Michigan. Had the pleasure of interning at the Pacific Forum, CSIS, and the U.S. Department of Commerce here, and the Hawaii State House of Representatives, and since then,
quite a diverse background.
And it's all helped prepare me for this position that I'm at now.
Okay.
So yeah, as the administrative coordinator, I essentially work with all of the students as well as the sales offices that we have around the world. And I help to coordinate the students' bookings before they arrive,
Okay.
and then I help answer immigration questions and different student inquiries. So.
All right. And then Jenny, would you mind sharing a little bit about your background as well?
Sure, that's a little hard to follow, to be honest. I am the academic director of the school, so I've been there for about 2 years, and prior to that I worked as the academic director for a school in Washington, D.C. as well.
Okay.
I have teaching experience in a lot of different countries, which has kind of given me the background that I needed in order to be successful in this position.
Awesome. And Kamakani.
My name is Kamakani Macdonald-Chun. I'm currently the interim activities coordinator for EF. Born and raised here in Hawaii.
Right on.
And yeah, so I pretty much have the fun job at EF. I show the students the island, take them on outings, help them plan and coordinate activities. So,
And
yeah.
were you born on Oahu?
Yep, I was born in Pupukea.
Oh, okay. So you really have like good island local knowledge of all the cool activities to
Yeah,
take students.
so I like to tell the students that anything they want to know about Hawaii, I can answer their questions.
Oh, that's awesome. All right. So today we're going to be talking about how international education has the ability to strengthen Hawaii's connection to the Asia Pacific. You know, living in Hawaii, this comes up so frequently. We're a bridge between East and West. We're the gateway to Asia. For Asians, we're the gateway to the United States. But how can Hawaii meaningfully participate in bridge building to Asia? So with that being said, tell me a little bit about Education First, the company, what you guys do.
Well, Education First is an international education company. It's actually the world's largest. We have different types of organizations worldwide. We have students who come from over 40 countries who come to our language school, and we have sales offices in over 40 countries as well.
So you're a pretty big global presence. You're not just a specific Hawaii organization, you're all over the world.
Right. And in addition to that, we also have a variety of programs, some of which are educational tours. We have an au pair program as well.
Okay.
We have business English training, so lots of different things.
Okay.
Yeah, my first experience with EF was after I graduated from high school. I went on an EF tour to Europe with my high school.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, so I participated in the EF tour and then now work with the language aspect of the
Okay.
school.
So if you wouldn't mind sharing, tell me a little bit about this program that you went on after high school. Like how many people went? Were they all from Hawaii or were they from all over the world?
The one that I went on specifically, it was a tour of Europe, and it was mixed in with our high school world history class. So about half of the students were a couple years younger than me. They were in 10th grade and they were getting credit for high school. And then me and my friends, we just went on it to have fun, basically. So we went to Germany, we went to Austria, we went to France, we went to Italy, and it was a great time. It was 2 weeks. We saw a bunch of things, extremely fast-paced, but yeah, definitely a great time.
That sounds really awesome. So tell me a little bit more about Education First. How long have you been here in Hawaii? How long have you been based here?
We're actually
Recently,
the second
or-
school.
Okay.
Yeah, so we've been here for 5 years now,
Okay.
and we're continuing to expand. But yeah, we've just been growing consistently since then.
Okay. And then what kind of programs in Hawaii do you offer for students?
Well, we have both short and long-term programs. So we have some programs that focus also on business. So we have internship programs as well. So generally the short-term programs can be anywhere from 2 weeks to maybe 6 to 8 weeks.
Okay, so not very time intensive at all. If someone was on a break, for example, like a summer break or a spring break, they could theoretically be involved in a program, not too much of a time commitment.
Yes, and we do have people who come specifically for that. Some for kind of more travel English sort of education, and then some for their businesses,
Okay.
or even for personal reasons. I had one student who came once because his daughter was marrying someone from the United States, so he needed to learn English so he could communicate with her. He was very nervous, but he wanted to learn all the cool English, it's what he told me.
Oh, I see. So tell me a little bit more about these programs. So you mentioned business and internships. Are there any other types of programs that you offer?
Well, the long-term programs we have, we call them AY programs. With those, it's a language program, but we also try to immerse the students in the community as much as we can.
Okay.
So for example, for this particular term, we do have students doing volunteer work in the community as well. So working with, we have one group working with the Boys and Girls Club. We've done things like beach cleanups. We had one group that worked with a homeless shelter one time. So part of a community aspect,
Okay.
and then also planning events for people in our program, but also from outside our program as well. So doing a little bit of event planning, and then also doing final presentations.
Okay. So how can companies like yours help to strengthen Hawaii's connection to the Asia Pacific? And I realize that's a huge question, so if you each want to weigh in or jump in at some point, feel free. How can companies like Education First really contribute to strengthening Hawaii-Asia ties? Because you don't just focus on Asia, right? But Asia is part of your core group, your target group.
They're one of our biggest markets, yes.
Oh, okay.
Right, and I think one of the ways we are able to bridge that gap is just by having more people study here, and they're not just here on vacation. So they have the opportunity to learn more about the culture from a local perspective. And I think Kamakani actually helps a lot with that, with the work he does in activities, because he's showing them what are some of the local things to do. So that way they're not just saying, okay, well, we need to hit up Waikiki or visit some of the more touristy areas, but every time that they're interacting with locals in places where locals spend time, they're seeing what we value here in Hawaii, and they're also seeing, perhaps they're seeing what they could do in the future here. Perhaps some of them are interested in coming back to school. I've met some students who, they like it so much, they're like, okay, well, I could see myself at Hawaii Pacific University.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so by that, we're just spreading more information about Hawaii and what it's like here, and also the opportunities that exist. So each student who spends a great amount of time here, they're going to take that away and also share that with all of their friends back home.
Oh, okay. And then how does this differ from a study abroad program? So what would make someone choose EF over saying, a study abroad program that might be sponsored by their home university? What's the difference?
Well, with study abroad programs, usually the university, it's more of a university intensive course. So many of those students have to have really high levels of English or be ready to perform in an academically challenging environment.
Which is hard, especially if you're going to be writing papers in
Right.
a language that you don't really know.
Yes.
Right, so this could perhaps serve as a transition for those students who would love to do a study abroad, but do not quite have the English level in order to do that. So our school is mostly language intensive. We just focus on teaching them English and preparing them either if they want to continue in a study abroad program or if they want to go into business or succeed in their personal lives.
Yeah, well, and in addition to that, a lot of study abroad programs, at least some that I've seen recently, are if they're through a university, then a lot of times they're just interacting with other students from their university.
Definitely.
So I went to Notre Dame and they had a London program, and so basically it was people hanging out with the same people they'd already met.
That's so true. I did a study abroad program in Australia. Wow, many years ago actually at this point. And it was wonderful. It wasn't obviously an English language program, but you're right. For the first semester that I was there, I only hung out with Americans. And for the second semester that I was there, I really had to make a concerted effort to go out and interact with Australians. And it was more of a challenge, but ultimately that's why you go, right? You go to a different country to interact with the locals, not the same people you would have hung out with back home.
Exactly. Well, and our school at EF, we have people not just from Hawaii, but from all over the world. So they're getting a truly international experience. So in studying abroad here, they're studying about the United States, but also they learn, I had some students who were learning some Japanese. I had a student from Switzerland who he had a friend and they would practice Japanese and German every day.
Wow.
So
That's
Yeah, and
great.
one of the things that we also do is for those of our students who live in the residence, who live in the dorms, they have to stay with somebody who's from a different country who speaks a different language from them.
Oh my gosh.
So they're not, they're not in that comfort zone. They're not with their friends. They're not with people, that they know. They're with somebody who speaks another language. The common language they have is English, so they're constantly practicing their English, and then also, learning about each other's country as well.
It's really neat. It seems like such a great opportunity. So in Hawaii, how many different countries are represented right now? Do you have, 5 countries? Do you have 10 countries? How many countries, different countries the students
I
are
think
here?
about 22.
So it's pretty.
Yeah, so it's pretty mixed right now.
Okay, and then in addition to countries in Asia, what other countries are represented?
We have a really large European base. So many students are from Switzerland, Germany, France, and they're coming here and they're meeting people from the Asia Pacific region when maybe they wouldn't have otherwise had that opportunity. So not only from Europe, but also from the Middle East. We have some Saudi Arabian students who study here on scholarship, Venezuelan students. So it's very diverse.
And then I'm assuming you have people from Japan and South Korea by any chance?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
And China too.
Oh, okay. And are we starting to see a lot more people come in from South Korea and China than you have historically? Or how do those numbers hold up?
I would say we have had an increase in people from China, but the visa process is quite difficult. So I think that has been a little bit of a kind of a stumbling block. But it's something that I think we're working more and more towards.
Okay, and then what about visas for people coming from Japan or South Korea? I know you work a lot with visas. Is
Right.
that challenging? Is that a little bit easier?
Well, on our side, it's a little bit more simple. We essentially see whether or not the student is in or not in, but on the sales offices, they're waging that battle for us with the embassies abroad. So I'm sure that could be a challenge, but on our end, we typically have had a good amount of success with students coming here. So.
Particularly from Japan, because I mean, a lot of people come here as tourists anyway.
Love it.
Yeah, so from Japan and Korea, so it's generally not too difficult to kind of make that next step to an educational visa.
So, as I understand it, there are quite a few programs who, at least on their face, seem to do similar types of work that you do: English language training, English intensive in other countries, or just even other programs that exist here in Honolulu. How does Education First differentiate itself from those other types of schools? What's your point of differentiation?
I would say one of the main things is that most language schools in Hawaii do cater to the Asia Pacific market, whereas Education First, we are truly global. So many of our students are from other countries, and it gives the students who are from Asia and the Pacific the chance to mix and mingle with people who are from everywhere else. So just by that, it's definitely different.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, and one of the other things that we really try to focus on is we believe that learning a language is not just inside a classroom, it's actually outside as well. So we do have a lot of programs outside, particularly doing some of the volunteering work, doing internships, or we call them volunteerships, in different businesses. And a lot of our teachers take our students on field trips frequently. So we try to get our students out in the community as much as possible because we think that's really one of the best ways to learn.
I think that's really key. I mean, anybody who's taken a language class will always tell you, I can speak great textbook Spanish or textbook Japanese, but when I got on the ground, it was that's not how people speak, and that's not how they address each other. That's not what you would say in this situation, despite what the textbook tells you. You really need to have that in-person, in the community experience in order to really beef up your language skills. I think that's pretty key.
Yes.
All right. Well, we're going to take a short break here. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about the economic impacts that such programs have on Hawaii, as well as opportunities for people in Hawaii, like you at home watching, have to get involved. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. And we are back. Welcome again. This is ThinkTech Hawaii, today's show, Asia in Review. I'm your host, Ellise Akazawa, and my guests today are all from Education First. And if I understand correctly, it's EF.com, correct?
Yes.
EF.com. All right, so we have Liz Morquecho, Jenny Hickman, and Kamakani Macdonald-Chun. Thanks again for joining us in studio today. We're talking about the benefits that Hawaii can reap from international education programs like those run by Education First. So let's talk a little bit about the economic impact that such a program might have here in Hawaii. You know, we talk a lot about tourism and how tourism is such an important pillar of our economy, but how do programs like yours fit into the overall economic picture, and how does it help strengthen Hawaii's local economy?
One of the things that shouldn't be underestimated is the fact that each student who comes here, they also know many people who also might be interested in coming and traveling with them. For example, students come here with their families because they're not feeling as comfortable, you know, they're trying to learn a new language, and you know, they just want a little bit more security. So not only are we reaping the benefit of the student and the economic impact that that person has, but we're also reaching out to other people, for example, their moms or dads who might be visiting with them. And that just all builds up and leads to a more prosperous Hawaii.
Yeah, and in addition to that, when the students come and they're here for an extended period of time, they will get involved in different types of things than they might be involved in the short term. So students who are here for the long term may take ballet classes, for example, or hula lessons or something like that. So they're supporting local enterprises that are kind of more about activities that are longevity, that you learn over time. In addition to that, one of the things we mentioned earlier is a lot of the students, if they've been here for a while, some of them say they really like it and consider coming to university here. And if that's the case, then that's another way that they could be contributing economically to us.
Yeah, and I handle mostly the activities and that sort of thing. So a lot of our students, if they're here for like a short period of time, or I should say when tourists are here for a short period of time, they might do like 1 or 2 activities here in Hawaii. But we provide, you know, a range of activities throughout the week, every week for our students. And since they're here for a few months, they won't just go like shark diving, but they'll also go shark diving and skydiving and swimming with dolphins. Like a lot of those type of things that if they were just here for a short period of time, they wouldn't be able to do. And we also like to have events, you know, that are more locally focused. Like for example, this week Thursday, we're having a Hawaiian food night. So you know, we're gonna take the students to Ono's, let them try some Hawaiian food. You know, maybe they'll like it, maybe they don't. But you know, once they get a taste, we're just introducing them to that so that they can go back on their own, go back with their friends. You know, try it again. Some things that normally as tourists they wouldn't necessarily do.
So is your job to just plan these awesome, fun outings and take people on these kinds of outings?
He's so lucky, isn't he?
That's like, yeah,
How did
pretty
you land
much.
this job?
I just applied for it. And, you know, I thought it sounded like a good time. Thought it sounded like
It
a
sounds
fun
like a
thing
great
to do.
time.
Yeah, so I take the students to the beach, take them hiking. Pretty much just have fun all week with the students.
And you're getting paid for it.
What are
Yeah.
the rest of us doing?
My job is basically to make sure the students have fun. You know, give them a great Hawaiian experience, make sure they have fun, but by doing so, I also get to have fun. So yeah, I definitely love it.
And I bet you've got really great insight because you're born and raised in Hawaii on Oahu, so you know all the cool spots, you know the places that are off the beaten path, so you really are able to sort of provide that local knowledge and give an authentic experience that might not necessarily be available to people who are here, like you said, short-term tourists. So that's pretty neat. That sounds like a great job. So are there any other benefits? You know, we talked about all the tourist activity, the tourism activities or the outdoor activities that students participate in, as well as the potential to attend university later on if they really like their stay in Hawaii. What other economic benefits are there? For example, how many people in Hawaii does EF employ?
Locally, we have a smaller office, but we reach out.
I'm counting my teachers, how many teachers I have.
So generally we have about 5 full-time admin who are there at the school, and then the teachers, it does vary seasonally.
I think I have about 10 teachers right now.
Wow, that's quite a few.
Yeah, and a lot of them are individuals who have graduated from HPU and have gotten their masters.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it's really wonderful to be able to hire people who have gone to school here, been educated here, and then they can get a job here. But they still have access to the world in the work that they do.
And also, a lot of our students live in the residence, and some live with host families. But in addition to that, some of the ones who are here for longer periods of time, you know, rent their own apartments, rent their own houses here in Hawaii. So
Okay.
that's adding a little bit to the economy.
For sure. So tell me about the long-term students who are here. You mentioned some short-term students stay, as short as 2 to 6 weeks. Long-term students, are they here for months at a time, a year at a time? How long do long-term students in your program typically stay?
Generally, it's 6 months, 9 months, or 1 year. We also have an 11-month program, but that's generally how long they stay for. So it is a while, and each and every time they go out to eat, that is boosting our local economy, right?
And
Definitely.
then also you had mentioned when we were talking earlier that it's a time of real growth for EF, that summer is a really busy time for you and you're getting a lot of students. How many students do you have now? I guess currently.
Well, right now we're right around 160. But
Oh, no. We're more
We're
than that.
much
We
more
had a
than
lot more
360.
students come in this week.
we did have an intake of 60 this Monday. So.
Right, so
Oh wait, I'm sorry, of how many?
60.
60.
Yeah, so
60.
every week we get new students.
That must be a challenge for you as staff people. I mean, constantly staying. I work at Pacific Forum. It's a foreign policy research institute here in Honolulu. And we have resident research fellows who come in. We typically don't have more than 10 fellows at a time. We just had a big turnover recently where we have maybe 3 to 4 new people in the office. And that, for us, was a huge change. Just getting used to the new people and people transitioning out and people transitioning in. I can't imagine having to, I guess, be responsible for and think about the logistics involved when 60 new people show up in a week, and you can expect that something similar to that might happen as well next week.
Oh,
or 2
yes.
weeks, next month.
During the summer,
Yeah, so the next 2 months.
Yeah, during the summer, we have a lot of students who come for a short-term program because a lot of places have their summer vacations and things like that. So yeah, so we have quite a few students who come in the summer, and it is a little bit of a logistical challenge, but we manage. We do pretty well, so.
And I'd say that's actually one of the highlights about working at Education First. It's certainly a fast-paced environment, and
Never bored. That's always
Never.
good. No one's falling asleep.
Never bored.
Yeah,
Never
never
bored.
a boring moment. And there's a lot of room for us to take on new projects and be very entrepreneurial. That's one of the core values of the company. And I think that's just fantastic to experience at a younger age. And it's certainly something that I think will help me in my career down the road when I can say I've, not only managed sales, but also, had these student intakes of over 60 people. Sometimes we do get up to 80, and, then also the outflow at the end of the week. So it's absolutely fast-paced, but it's something that makes the day very interesting and goes by so fast.
Well, and in the summer, the students actually really like it because there's so much variety. They have so many new students coming that they can meet all the time, new friends, people that they can go on activities with. And it's funny, I've seen some students who are here for an extended period of time, and during the summer, they kind of open up a little bit more if they've been here, and they kind of become the tour guides.
Oh, okay.
So it's actually really exciting, really fun to see.
Yeah, I've noticed in general that our students as a whole are really open, really enthusiastic about meeting new people. They're not really shy at all, and like the ability to meet so many new people, I think they really enjoy that. They like that for sure.
I feel like that must, they must look back on that and think that's a really special time in their lives. The opportunity to live in Hawaii, getting to meet and interact with so many different people from all over the world. That seems like a really important takeaway when they look back on that experience.
Oh, very much. This past year when we had kind of our end of the year thing in May, we had so many students who, they said, this is my family, and I have to leave my family. I was almost in tears. I was leading the graduation. I was like, oh, yeah. But yeah, they really, it becomes kind of a family for them here. And yeah, it is really, really special.
So talking about family segues really nicely into talking about community. So what are the opportunities for people from Hawaii who might like to interact with these students or get to know them or help people practice English or whatever it may be? What kinds of opportunities exist?
Well, in addition to everyone taking their own initiative to go out and reach out to these international students, you have to consider the fact that their goal is to practice their English. Their goal is to learn English, learn about the local culture. And here in Hawaii, we have so much to offer and so much to share about our home. And so I would encourage everyone, if, just take a little time out of your day to reach out to an international student and befriend them and just learn from them and ask them, hey, how does American culture differ from the culture in your home country? So that would be one way that everyone could take it upon themselves to learn more about a new place. But in addition to that, we do have some structural programs which we offer. We are looking for host families. We are always actively recruiting, and host families are able to host a student for anywhere from 2 weeks. You can get started at 2 weeks, and then some of the students will stay for up to 9 months or 1 year, and that's something that we're always looking for. In addition, we have a volunteership program.
So let me pause right there. Tell me a little bit more about the host family program, because that was something growing up I realized that a lot of other families did, but I didn't know anybody personally who had been a host family. What is that experience like? What kind of requirements or what's the criteria for a family becoming a host family? Do you need to spend a lot of time with the student? What does that entail?
For the most part, the students live with their host families. They eat meals with them, but then they come to school during the daytime. But they are encouraged, to participate in activities with their host families in addition to the activities that we have at school. And I've noticed for the most part, our students, they get really close to their host families. Their host mom and dads, they view them just as if they were their parents, and they spend so much time there in the homes that they really establish a bond. I've seen a number of our host families, they share their photo albums with us of the students that they have, and they really love it. It
So
gives them an
sweet.
opportunity to learn about another country, experience another country without leaving home. People have been here in Hawaii their whole life, but they've experienced 10, 20 different countries just by having students come into their families.
Yeah, it's a great option for people who maybe would have liked to study abroad, and then they're just very curious about the world around them, and it just offers them an inside peek at what it is like. And it's not too time intensive. We just ask that our host families provide breakfast and dinner Monday through Friday, and then all meals on the weekends. And then of course we do have Kamakani, who takes them all around the island. So of course we wouldn't expect that our host families are constantly
The tour guide.
up and back and forth to
That would
North
be
Shore.
tiring.
Yeah, they're not expected to be the tour guide, but just offer them a warm, welcoming, comfortable environment, like a nice place to come home to.
And we do require that they provide them with a room.
That's
so
key.
they-
They need a place to live. Sounds good.
Right. Well, and
not a
sometimes
house.
you can have more than one student in a room. So you
Oh,
could
okay.
have, for example, if you have a room that maybe your two sons stayed in and now they're away. So it could be 2 or 1, but we think it's really important that the student have kind of his or her own space.
Sure.
Because adjusting to a new cultural environment is really hard, and if you're sharing a room with,
Multiple people.
Multiple
or couch
people.
surfing, yeah, that's
It-
probably not a good plan.
yeah,
for
too
success.
difficult. So we want to provide a certain amount of comfort and safety for them too.
All right, so let's take a quick break here. We'll be right back. We will come back after the break and talk a little bit more about what it takes to be a host family for students from Education First. Stay with us, we'll be right back. Welcome back to ThinkTech Hawaii. This is Asia in Review, and I'm your host, Ellise Akazawa. We are here today with the folks from Education First. I've got Liz Morquecho, Jenny Hickman, and Kamakani Macdonald-Chun in the studio today. Again, all three of you, thanks so much for making time out of your extremely busy schedules, no doubt, to be here with me in studio. Before the break, we were talking about the host families that Education First provides for students. So some students who are here on your program may choose to live in the residences, as you mentioned. They may choose to seek their own accommodation, but one option available to them is host families. So we were talking about the requirements for host families, and I'm assuming that some sort of monetary compensation is offered for people who host students.
Yes.
Yes. We allow the host families to have either one room or 2 rooms. I'm sorry, you can have one room and have 1 student in it, or you can have a room and put 2 students in it. So that's generally the more economical option, and it's also a great way to introduce more students into your home. And that way you can make up to $960 per month if you host the 2 students for the entire month.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So in terms of host families, are there specific types of families that you're looking for? Because in my mind, when I think of students and host families, I think, mom, dad, a couple of kids, dogs and cats. But like, what about, people who have multi-generational families, or, perhaps couples with no children? Are those acceptable types of host families, or are you looking for a specific type of family?
Definitely. I mean, we want to show people the diversity that is the United States and that is Hawaii. So yeah, definitely all different kinds, multi-generational. Even people who, I think a lot of students in their mind when they get here is they think they're going to get, a white couple. Like that's honestly what they think.
That's a really good thing to point out, because that would be an expectation that many students from abroad might have about the U.S.
Exactly, but then they're with people who have different ethnic backgrounds, but they're from here in the United States, and so it actually teaches them a lot about what it means to be an American here in the United States. Is that you're mixed from everywhere.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, so we love that, because that's another way to culturally teach them.
Yeah, especially here in Hawaii, everybody's so
So
different.
diverse.
Yeah, exactly.
And we have a lot of students who have gone to schools, in the continental United States, and they come here to Hawaii, and they're like, wow, Hawaii is so different than the U.S.
Yeah,
And they're
it's
just
different.
so surprised by that, like both with the host family experience and the experience in general.
So do you have a large pool of host families? Does that pool change? Are some people host families for, many years? How does that work? Are you constantly recruiting for new host families?
We do have some who stay on with us for a very, very long time, but others, perhaps they have a child who's gone off to college and comes back in the summers, and then they'll just rent out that room for that time. But we do have somewhat of a turnover, but especially in the summer, that's when we do most of our active recruitment, because our student body does expand so much from 150 all the way up to 360 students, 380. So at that time, we definitely need more host families to accommodate all of those students.
Yeah, it's definitely based on the demand of the students, because when when they are enrolling in their school, they're given the option of living in the residence with the other students or living with the host family. So just depending on what the students ask for during their time when they're booking their stay here.
I see. So can host families live anywhere on Oahu? Or do they need to be within some proximity to town?
Yeah, we ask that they're within 1 hour by bus of the school of Waikiki, because the students, the host families aren't expected to drive the students to school, so they are catching the bus. So we want them to be pretty close, so that the students don't have to spend too much time on the bus.
Yeah, that's a really good point. But that actually, leaves quite a few neighborhoods in town, because an hour by bus, there are a fair few places that are accessible to town an hour by bus.
Yeah, and during the summer, we're a little bit more flexible with that, just because we have so many students that we are able to accept host families, on the outer regions that we wouldn't generally be able to accept during the normal school year.
Oh, okay. And you mentioned that really the number of host families that you need, it depends on student demand. I guess percentage-wise, how many students generally opt for living with host families? Would you say maybe 25% or 80%? How many students choose host families?
I'd say it's difficult to quantify, because it's constantly changing.
Oh, okay.
So at some points in the year, it might be a smaller number of students, or some students might get really excited about
Host families.
about living in a host family, and so they might switch over there. So it's constantly, it's very dynamic,
Yeah.
the number of students that we have.
It's true. That's
So
very
for
true.
people who are interested in potentially being a host family, what kind of flexibility do they have, if any, in terms of selecting the student who's going to live with them? Because, you know, you are bringing someone into your home. Does Education First just place, you know, random student
Yeah,
from
no,
Japan
no.
here in this family? How does that, is there a matching process? How does that work?
There is a matching process. The host family can give us parameters in terms of, you know, the general age range that they want for students, background, all of those things, whether it's a man or a woman. So yeah, we allow a lot of flexibility because we understand you are bringing somebody into your home, and maybe, you know, you have all daughters and you maybe don't want a male host person. So.
And we do have students of all ages too. They range from 13 all the way up to, I know we've had a few who are 65.
Oh no, we had
69.
some 70-year-olds.
Some 70-year-olds?
Okay.
Okay.
Oh no,
Because
right.
the whole time we're talking about this program, I'm sort of thinking, you know, just very stereotypically, I guess, about teenagers or recent college graduates and not people who are, you know, pushing 60 or 70.
Yeah.
But that's great that your program can accommodate people at any stage in their life who are wanting to learn English.
Yeah, and sometimes they're the most fun. We had a married couple from Japan. It was a husband and a wife, and they were very, very good students. And the wife would get very angry at the husband for not speaking English, and she would openly scold him. She'd say,
Oh, I
"English,
remember that.
English only." No. So she was adorable. So.
And that's generally our job too, to be the ones who say English only, because in the school we only allow them to speak English. So that she's doing that for us.
She was the
and so
English
that's
police
so much
for me.
easier.
I would be walking over to say something. She'd be like, "You, English only." Okay, all right.
You know, that's really interesting, the part about older students. When I was going to undergrad at the University of Puget Sound, at the time we did have an exchange student who, I mean, I can't remember his age specifically, but I want to say he must have been at least late 50s, early 60s. He was from Japan, but it was a really interesting experience because, you know, he brought such a different perspective and he had such a different outlook. You know, he was really willing to engage. He had really thoughtful, in-depth questions that someone who's a little bit older and a little bit more mature would think to ask about life in the United States. It was really, I think it really enhanced, you know, our experience there.
Yeah. And I've also noticed that some of our older students, you know, they're more comfortable, like, you know, trying to help out the younger students. So they're like kind of tutoring them a little bit, having little study sessions in the lounge, helping out the younger students. And the younger students really look to them like for advice and for help as well. So I think that's a great thing that they are able to offer.
This is a little bit on a side note, but I'm really curious, how do you market yourself in Asia? So do you need to have like a really big marketing effort to get the Education First name out there? How are students, you know, from say Japan or South Korea or China, how are they finding you? How do they know that you're here?
Well, it's an international education company that's very well established. We do have marketing mechanisms in place. So one of the things that I've noticed that we do is social media. We do a lot with social media and attracting students that way, locally in those countries. But also we have sales offices. And the sales offices are the students' main point of contact. And I think a lot of times they do feel more comfortable when they're able to call up the sales office and ask questions in their native tongue and find out, you know, what is this experience going to be like. So the sales offices help to just confirm the marketing efforts that I guess we've put in place. And I know we probably do some sort of media as well.
Media, but also one of our most powerful, I think one of our most powerful marketing efforts is the students themselves. So we do a lot with getting students to give us referrals as well. And then we do have, for example, like we have an EF ambassador program, so where students can introduce EF to other students. So, and we have a lot of like friends and family who come. So it's actually really great when you have one student and then, you know, several months later you see the sister and the brother come as
really
well.
neat.
Oh, it's really, it's cute. Though sometimes they don't want to be in the same class together. Yeah, so.
So what I'm really interested in as well is the academic component of Education First. We've taught a lot about the cultural activities, the opportunities for families to become host families and engaging. I do want to get back to volunteerships at some point, but can you tell me about the academic program that you offer? Is it a 9 to 5? And how do you deal with people who have different language abilities different English language abilities coming from different countries. So I can see, you know, if I have 20 students from Japan who have never spoken English or spoken or written English before, that's one thing. But if I have students from Japan, students from Europe, all coming in at different levels, how do you manage that?
Well, we all of our students, when they're first enrolling in the school, either before they come or on their first day after they're given an orientation, they take a placement exam. So that way they're placed into the correct level that would fit them best.
And it's not divided up by age, so you can have a 13-year-old in there with the 64. If they're at the same English level, then that's where they'll be placed.
And then we do have kind of a standardized curriculum here with all of the other EF schools throughout the world. And it's something that has been effective consistently for a very long time. And also our teachers are very well trained. The majority of our teachers have master's degrees.
Okay.
So they are actually able to work with these multi-generational, kind of multicultural environments. And they actually see it as a big benefit, as a way that they can actually enrich the experience for the students.
Okay, so it's not just, you know, oh, I see this ad on, you know, some website for teach English. They'll just hire me. You have
No, they have to, and it's an extensive interview process. I make them do a model lesson too. So I take them, they just have to go in and teach a model lesson in front of everyone. It's great.
That's
very nerve-wracking for them.
That sounds scary, but it also seems like a great way to test, you know, are these people going to be capable, competent teachers of English in a setting where maybe you are intimidated by all the people in the room.
Exactly.
And all of our students, they do rate their teachers, you know, give them reviews. So that way we're able to see how well, you know, the students are able to learn from their teachers. Because if they don't, you know, if they don't enjoy the class, if they don't like the teachers, then they're not going to give them really good reviews. But if they're having a great experience within the classroom, we are able to see that.
Definitely. And how do you recruit teachers? Is it word of mouth? Is it established relationships with some people? So, you know, when you have periods of high demands, you call on these same people to come back. How do you find your teachers?
It's a mix. I think the best way that I've found teachers has been kind of word of mouth and referrals from other teachers. And we're very fortunate in that there are several masters in TESOL programs here on the island. There's one up at BYUH. There's also one at HPU, and right now I have several teachers from that program, and they're fantastic. I feel so lucky. I have amazing teachers right now.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So volunteerships, what does that mean? Does that mean you're just placed in a nonprofit organization to volunteer? How does your volunteership program work? Because I imagine that's also a critical component of developing English language facility. You can practice in the classroom with your peers, but when you get into the workplace, there's a whole new level of English required. How does your volunteership program work?
Yes, so our program is that the first 4 weeks, the students get an opportunity to learn the things they need in order to get a placement. So for example, interviewing skills, how to write a resume, American style or English style.
That's really key. That's a good skill.
Yeah, telling them, you know, you don't put whether you're single or married, you don't put your blood type on there. I've seen
them too. I have seen them too. So I
blood type. Yeah, so you completely understand. Yeah. So and then teaching them things that are appropriate in the workplace, not appropriate. You know, how do you handle conflict, things like that.
And it's so different. You know, everywhere you go, it's different, and that's something that I've experienced in many workplaces where you have an international environment, and just the way that people interact with each other, problem solve, it's very, very different, and that's good that you do that training because it's not the same everywhere in the world.
Exactly. Well, and we also do a skills inventory too, because we really want to make sure we place the student in an appropriate place, and based on the student's interests and then what their abilities are right now. We don't want to put a student who isn't as comfortable with their reading and writing doing an editing internship, for example. Or volunteership. That would not be good. So once the students has done all of those different things for the coursework, they have interviews for placements in different places, and then we try to find a match. And if the placement accepts, then the student will have a structured schedule with the organization. We also have a specific list of what the student will be doing that's agreed on kind of mutually with both of us. And yeah, and then it goes from there, and we are consistently getting feedback from the student and from the organization.
That sounds really great. We're going to take a short break right here. When we come back after the break, we'll talk a little bit more about volunteerships. We'll also talk a little bit more about some of your fun experiences, some memorable experiences that you've had with students from Education First. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. This is ThinkTech Hawaii, and today's show is Asia in Review. We've had a great discussion so far, I think, in the course of the show with the folks from Education First, Liz Morquecho, Jenny Hickman, and Kamakani Macdonald-Chun. Thanks again for having like a really fun, interesting conversation explaining what Education First does. Right before the break, we were talking about volunteerships and how students can be placed in organizations to volunteer, get an understanding of what the workplace is like in the US, develop their skills, get more familiar, more comfortable. So how do you find businesses or organizations that take students on for volunteerships? Are you always seeking new opportunities? How does that work?
Yes, we have a volunteership coordinator who is constantly seeking. So that's another way, actually, if individuals are interested in being involved with our organization, that's another way that people can get involved.
And I think it would be especially great for those businesses who are involved with international trade. What better way to learn about a culture and learn about consumer preferences and what, right? About consumer preferences from someone who is from that country and oftentimes is already doing business in the country. Sometimes a lot of our students are older and that's what they're interested in doing, and a lot of them have those positions already. Many of them are involved in international trade of some sort, and that's why they are learning English so that they can continue to boost their marketability. So why not harness that as a local business, right?
That sounds awesome. And is there a placement fee incurred by the businesses or the organizations? I'm just trying to think of any costs that the organization bears.
The organization doesn't bear any cost.
Sounds awesome.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's really great. The only thing that we ask is that they supervise the student, because we don't really like putting a student in a placement if they're just going to kind of let the student do whatever, because we do want it to be a good experience for the student as well.
A learning experience, not a free labor.
Exactly. And to provide us with feedback. And then if the student requests a letter of recommendation, for example, at the end, from the business, that the business provide that.
That sounds awesome. It sounds, I'm sure a lot of businesses, like you mentioned, especially if they're doing international trade, would be interested in having a student come and volunteer with them, get an understanding of their organization, while at the same time providing value to the organization.
Yeah, we actually have a student placed at TradeWinds Global, which is an international trade organization. So
that sounds awesome. So one of the things that we've been talking about, not directly but indirectly throughout the program, are the differences between the US and life here and countries elsewhere. Education, that must also be a very, education models differ wherever you go. Even within the United States, there's tremendous diversity of how people teach and learn. What are the differences between East and West that you've noticed, and how do you accommodate for that at Education First?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that I've noticed, because I actually lived in Japan for a while and taught, is that I feel like the classrooms in the United States, or especially language right now, are very democratic. So it's not that the teacher has all the knowledge and the students have none. It's we believe that kind of everybody has something to contribute. So you'll see in our classes a lot of consensus building, where when you're going over answers for something, the teacher will say, "Does everyone agree?" Oh yes, so that everyone feels like they're contributing. Whereas I've seen in some of the other school systems where the teacher is the sole source of knowledge. So I think that kind of that democratic nature, and it takes a while for students, particularly from Asia, to adjust to that.
I would imagine, because I've experienced that a lot. I studied abroad and I had, I guess, some sort of international education, and in many cases American students are the first ones to raise their hands and participate, because that's what we're trained to do. It's a sign of paying attention, it's a sign of being a good student in the United States, to engage, ask questions, challenge each other. But many Asian students don't feel comfortable just saying, actually such and such, this is why I think that's wrong, and here's my opinion. It's not culturally acceptable. So imagine that must be challenging.
It really is, and so what we like to do a lot of times is we'll put the students maybe into small partners to talk about something first before we do something as a class as a whole. And we do that every day. We break it up, but we try to do that so that students get comfortable maybe expressing their opinion one-on-one, and maybe they are not comfortable today expressing their opinion in front of the whole class, but maybe after a little bit of practice they are. But we do tell them that when they're learning a language, they are learning a culture as well. And we're transparent about the fact that, this will be hard for you, and it's okay. Don't worry, it's okay. Because I think if students aren't aware that it's going to be difficult culturally as well as linguistically, then they have a little bit of a harder time.
So I'm also really interested in hearing about any experiences that you've had, any funny stories, or any stories that you think are really instructive about the challenges of bringing all these international people to a classroom in Hawaii to learn English. Do you have any such stories?
Well, most of my stories aren't within the classroom, but outdoor stories. So for example, last week we went to Monowili Falls, and our students as a whole, they're really outgoing, really independent, really adventurous. So one of our students had forgotten something in the van, so I was going back, giving her the keys and that sort of thing. And by the time I got back to the trail, the rest of the group, the other 20 or so students, were all gone.
Oh my gosh.
They had all disappeared off on their own. And I was like, well, I'm assuming that some of them had hiked Monowili Falls before. They knew how to get there. So I went about my way with the trail with a few students who had stayed behind with me. And once I got to the trail, I noticed that none of the other students were there. We were the only ones there. And I was kind of like,
you weren't aware of
No.
I was like, wow, they didn't want to wait for me. I guess they didn't know where they were going. But sure enough, they started coming in, trickling in groups of 2, groups of 3. And then I was like, where'd you guys go? You all ran off ahead while I was, back at the van. You didn't wait for me. I thought you knew where you were going. And they're like, well, we thought we knew where we were going too.
Gosh.
And come to find out that they had gone off on every different trail possible along the way. One went off this way, one went off that way, and it was kind of funny. I was like, wow, you guys literally went on every wrong trail. But but eventually, I found the group. I was like, ooh, kind of scared for a little bit that I was going to lose a student, but yeah, it was
Okay.
interesting experience.
All right. I'm glad you found them all.
Yes, I hadn't shared that story before.
That's it. First one.
Thanks for sharing it with us. So any other interesting stories, any experiences that were particularly instructive for you?
I think the one that I maybe had mentioned before about culturally was we had a student from the Middle East in class with a young lady from Latin America.
Okay.
And the styles of dress and kind of what's appropriate in the countries is very different. So they were in a conversation class together. And so in his culture, in the Middle East, he was taught that you don't look a woman in the eye. You have to make sure that you avert your eyes in order to be respectful and polite. Well, unfortunately, that particular day, the young lady was wearing a very skimpy attire, and so he was trying to look and be appropriate with where he was looking, and he was very confused.
Oh, no.
And the young lady didn't understand that he was actually trying to be polite by not looking her in the eye, by looking somewhere else. And so she was really angry, and he was just confused and upset. So it was something that kind of we didn't even think about. And so we kind of spoke to her and said that when she's speaking with him, it might be good to cover up a little bit so that he's a little bit more comfortable. And then we told him that, we understand that culturally you're not supposed to, but in our culture you generally do. So if you could maybe try to look somewhere in between.
That's acceptable.
That's acceptable. Mm-hmm.
Are there any other sort of cultural briefings, I guess, that happen when students first arrive on the ground, so that way they are aware of things like personal space? In the United States, this is how close we stand to each other. Do you have briefings like that when students first arrive here to help eliminate some of that?
We do have something that's called Culture Series, which is not in the individual classrooms, but more so for our students as a whole. So that is teaching about Hawaiian culture, teaching about American culture, and they do participate within these activities.
That sounds really awesome. Well, thank you again, Liz, Jenny, and Kamakani, for being here today in studio with us at ThinkTech Hawaii, talking about education first, about the wonderful ways that students from abroad can come and learn English in Hawaii, participate in really cool activities with Kamakani, learn English, have Liz help them with the visa, and the ways that Hawaii families can get involved, host families, or even businesses with volunteerships. So if you're interested in learning more about education first, their website is ef.com, and they do have a Honolulu office right here. So thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure having you here. Take care. Have a great night.